Chapter 3 of The Shining Gateway by James Allen. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 3. Regeneration. Submit to naught but nobleness. Rejoice, like a strong athlete straining for the prize. When thy full strength is tried, be not the slave of lusts and cravings and indulgences, of disappointments, miseries, and griefs, fears, doubts, and lamentations. But control thyself with calmness, master, that in thee which masters others, and which heretofore has mastered thee. Let not thy passions rule, but rule thy passions. Subjugate thyself till passion is transmuted into peace, and wisdom crown thee. So shalt thou action attain, and by attaining, know. Having considered and examined the nature of temptation in its 5 interdependent stages, let us now turn to the process of regeneration, and also consider its nature, so that the reader who has already received some measure of enlightenment may be still further guided in his strenuous climbing towards the perfect life. The 5 stages in regeneration, already enumerated, are 1. Reflection, 2. Introspection, 3. Self-analysis, 4. Meditation, and 5. Pure perception. The first stage in a pure and true life is that of thoughtfulness. The thoughtless cannot enter the right way of life. Only the reflective mind can acquire wisdom. When a man, ceasing to go after enjoyment, brings himself to a standstill in order to examine his position, and to reflect upon the condition of the world and the meaning of life, then he has entered upon the first stage of regeneration. When a man begins to think seriously, and with a deep and noble purpose in view, he has stepped out of the broad way where the thoughtless and the frivolous clutch at the bubbles of pleasure, and has entered the narrow way where the thoughtful and the wise comprehend eternal verities. Such a man's liberation from sin and suffering is already assured, for though he is, as yet, surrounded by much uncertainty, he is already releasing a foretaste of the peace which awaits him. His passions, though still strong, are quieter. His mind is calmer and clearer. His intercourse with others is purer and graver. And in his moments of deepest thought he sees, as in a vision, the strength and calmness and wisdom which he knows will one day be his well-earned possessions. Thus he passes on to the second stage, reflecting day by day, with ever-increasing earnestness upon life in all its phases. He comes to perceive the passions and desires in which men are involved, and realizes the sorrows which are connected with their strangely ephemeral existence. He sees the burning fevers of lusts and ambitions and cravings for pleasure, and the chilling agues of anxieties and fears, and the uncertainty of slowly approaching death, and he aspires to know the meaning of it all, is eager to find the source and cause of that which seems so sorrowful and inexplicable. Recognizing himself as a unit in humanity, as one involved in like passions and sorrows with all other men, he vaguely understands that somehow the secret of all life is inevitably bound up with the neophyte, the mind purified, calmed, and his own existence, and so, unsatisfied with the surface theories which are based on observation only, and which still leave him subject to passions and sorrows, and the prey of anxieties and fears, he turns his thoughts inwardly upon his own mind, thinking perchance that the wished-for revelation of wisdom and peace awaits him there. Thus he becomes introspective, and so he passes on to the third stage. When the introspective habit is fully ripened and acquired, there is called upon in the mind a subtle process of inductive thought, by the aid of which the innermost recesses of the man's nature, and therefore of all humanity, begin to unveil themselves and yield up their secrets to the penetrating insight of the patient searcher, who, unraveling now the tangled threads of thought, and tracing out the warp and woof of the web of life as it is woven in the mental processes and by the swift-flying shuttle of thought, begins for the first time to somewhat clearly comprehend the inner causes of human deeds and the meaning and purpose of existence. As this purpose of thought is proceeded with, the desires and passions are purified away from the mind, the calmness necessary to a right perception of truth is acquired, and gradually the fixed principles of things are presented to the comprehension, and the eternal laws of life are coherently grasped by the understanding. And now, quietly, and almost as imperceptibly as the soft light of dawn stealing upon the sleeping world, controlled, passes into the fourth stage, and opens his long sleeping eyes upon the rising light of truth. He becomes habitually meditative, and in meditation he finds the master key which unlocks the door of knowledge. It is at this advanced stage in the process of regeneration that the sinner becomes the saint, and the pupil is transformed into the master. For here the process of transmutation, hitherto slow and painful, is greatly accelerated, so that the spiritual forces formerly spent in pleasures, gratifications, passions, and afflictions are now conserved, controlled, and turned into channels of productive and reproductive thought, and so wisdom is born in the mind, and bliss and peace. As skill and power are acquired in meditation, the fifth and last stage is reached, where the perfect insight of the seer and the sage is evolved, so that the facts of life are grasped, and the laws and principles of things stand revealed. Here the man is altogether regenerated, is purified and perfected, all human passions are conquered, and human sorrows are transcended. Here things are seen as they are, all the intricacies of life stand out naked in the light of truth, and there is no more doubt and perplexity, no more sin and anguish, for he whose pure and enlightened eyes perceive the hidden causes and effects which operate infallibly in human life, he who knows how the bitter fruits of passion ripen, and where the dark waters of sorrow spring, he it is who no more sins and no more sorrows. Lo, he has come to peace. The 5 stages so passed through may be thus presented. 1. Reflection. Deep and earnest thought on the nature and meaning of life. 2. Introspection. Looking inwardly for the causes and effects which operate in life. 3. Self-analysis. Searching the springs of thought and purifying the motives in order to find the truth of life. 4. Meditation. Pure and discriminative thought on the facts and principles of life. 5. Pure perception. Insight. Direct knowledge of the laws of life. The whole process of regeneration may be likened to the growth of a plant. At first the small seed of reflection is cast into the dark soil of ignorance. Then the little rootlets come forth and grope about for light and sustenance, introspection. Next the strenuous self-examination, as the plant reaching upwards toward the light. And then the development of the bud and opening flower of meditation, ending at last in that pure and wise insight which is the spiritual glory of the sage, the perfect flower of enlightenment. Thus beginning in sin and suffering, and passing through thoughtfulness, self-searching, self-purification, meditation, and insight, the seeker after the pure life and the divine wisdom reaches at last the undented habitation of a spotless life, and so passes beyond the dark halls of suffering, knowing the perfect law. End of Chapter 3. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 4 of The Shining Gateway by James Allen. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 4. Actions and Motives. Obey the right, and wrong shall never again assail thy peace. No error hurt thee more. Attune thy heart to purity, and thou shalt reach the place where sorrow is not, and all evil ends. It has been said the way to hell is paved with good intentions, and one frequently hears sin excused on the ground that it was done with a good motive. There are actions which are bad in themselves, and there are actions which are good in themselves, and good intentions cannot make the former good. Selfish intentions cannot make the latter bad. Foremost among actions which are bad in themselves are those which are classified as criminal by all civilized communities. Thus, murder, theft, adultery, libel, etc. are always bad, and it is not necessary to inquire into the motive which prompts them. Black and white remain black and white to all eternity, and are not altered by specious argumentations. A lie is eternally a lie, and no number of good intentions can turn it into a truth. If a man tells a lie with a good intention, he has nonetheless uttered a lie. If a man speak the truth with a selfish intention, he has nonetheless spoken the truth. Beside those actions above mentioned, there are others which, while not classified by the law of the land as criminal, are yet recognized as wrong by nearly all intelligent people. Actions pertaining to social and family life, and to our everyday relations with our fellow men. Thus, when a child willfully violates its duty to its parents, the father does not stop to inquire into the motives of the child, but metes out the due correction, because the act of disobedience is wrong in itself. The reader may here ask, in being taught then to regard the motive, the condition of heart, as all important, and the act as secondary, have we been taught wrongly? No, you have not. The motive is all important, for it determines the nature of the act. And here we must distinguish between intentions and motives. When people speak of good and bad motives, they nearly always mean good or bad intentions. That is, the action is done with a certain object, good or bad, in view. The motive is the deeply seated cause in the mind, the habitual condition of the heart. The intention is the purpose in view. Thus an act may spring from an impure motive, yet be done with the best intention. It is possible for one to be involved in wrong motives, and yet at the same time be so charged with good intentions as to be continually intruding himself on other people, and interfering in their business and their lives, under the delusion that they need his help. Intentions are more or less superficial, and are largely matters of impulse, while motives are deeply seated, and are concerned with a man's fixed moral condition. A man may do an action today with a good intention, and in a few weeks' time do the same action with a bad intention. But in both instances, the motive underlying the action will be the same. In reality, a wrong act cannot spring from a right motive, although it may be guided by a good intention. A man who can resort, whether habitually or under stress of temptation, to murder, theft, lying, or other actions known as bad, is in a dark, confused condition of mind, and is not capable of acting from right motives. Such acts can only spring from an impure source, and this is why the great teachers rarely refer to motives, but always refer to actions. In their precepts, they tell us what actions are bad and what are good, without any reference to motive, for the bad and good acts in themselves are the fruits of bad and good motives. By their fruits you shall know them. In being exhorted to judge not, we are not taught to persuade ourselves that grapes are figs and figs are grapes, but must employ our judgment in clearly distinguishing between the two. So in the like manner, we must distinguish with unmistakable clearness between bad actions and good actions, so as to avoid the former and embrace the latter. For only in this way can one purify his heart and render himself capable of acting from right motives. A clear perception of what is bad or good, both in ourselves and others, is not false judgment, it is wisdom. It is only when one harbors groundless suspicion about others and reads into their actions bad and selfish intentions that he falls into that judging against which we are warned, and which is so pernicious. There is no need to doubt the good intentions of those about us, while at the same time being fully alive to a knowledge of those bad actions which are better left undone, and those good actions which were better done, taking care not to do the former, and to do the latter ourselves, thus teaching by our lives, instead of accusing and condemning others. Numberless wrong actions are committed every day with good intentions, and this is why so many good purposes are frustrated and end in disappointment, because the underlying motive is impure, and the good fruit which is sought does not appear. The act is out of harmony with good intent. The means are not adapted to the end. Bad actions bring forth bitter fruit. Good actions bring forth sweet fruit. The law runs, "Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery," not "Thou shalt not kill, steal, or commit adultery with a bad motive." Wrong actions are always accompanied with self-delusion, and the chief form which such self-delusion assumes is that of self-justification. If a man flatter himself that he can commit a sinful act, and yet be free from sin because he is prompted by a pure motive, no limit can be set to the evil which he may commit. It will be found that bad actions, in the majority of instances, are accompanied with good intentions. The object of the slanderer generally is to protect his fellow men from one another. Troubled with foolish suspicions, or smarting under the thought of injury, he warns men against each other, speaking only of their bad qualities, and in his eagerness, distorting the truth. His intention is good, namely, to protect his neighbors, but his motive is bad, namely, hatred of those whom he slanders. Such a man's good intention is frustrated by his bad intention, and he at last only succeeds in separating himself from all truth-loving people. The sore of a bad action is not cured by plastering it over with good intentions, nor is the cause of the defilement removed from the heart. Men who are involved in bad actions cannot work from pure motives. An issue of foul water always proceeds from an impure source, and an issue of impure actions proceeds from a heart that is defiled. It greatly simplifies life and solves all complex problems of conduct when certain actions are recognized as eternally bad and others as eternally good, and the bad are forever abandoned, and final refuge is taken in the good. The wise and good perform good actions, and motives, acts, and intentions, being harmoniously adjusted, their lives are powerful for good and free from disappointment, and the good fruit of their efforts appears in due season. They do not need to defend their actions by subtle and specious arguments, not to enter into interminable metaphysical speculations concerning motives, but are content to act and leave their actions to bear their own fruit. Let us not try to persuade ourselves that our good intentions will wipe out the results of our bad actions, but let us resort to the practice of good actions, for only in this way can we acquire goodness. Only thus can the life be established on fixed principles, and the mind be rendered capable of comprehending and working from pure motives. End of Chapter 4. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 5 of The Shining Gateway by James Allen. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 5. Morality and Religion. The wise man, by adding thought to thought and deed to deed in ways of good, buildeth his character. Little by little he accomplishes his noble ends. In quiet patience works diligently. Daily he builds his heart and mind, pure thoughts, high aspirations, selfless deeds, until at last the edifice of truth is finished, and behold, there rises and appears the temple of perfection. There is no surer indication of confusion and decadence in spiritual matters than the severance of morality from religion. He is a highly moral man, but he is not religious. He is exceptionally good and virtuous, but is not all that spiritual, are common expressions on the lips of large numbers of people who thus regard religion as something quite distinct from goodness, purity, and right living. If religion be regarded merely and only as worship, combined with adherence to a particular form of faith, then it would be correct to say, he is a very good man, but is not religious, in some instances, just as it would be equally correct to say, he is an immoral man, but is very religious, in other instances. For murderers, thieves, and other evildoers are sometimes devout worshippers and zealous adherents to a creed. Such a narrowing down of religion, however, would render much of the Sermon on the Mount superfluous from a religious point of view, and would lead to the confounding of the means of religion with its end, the idolizing of the letter of religion to the exclusion of the spirit, and this is what actually occurs when morality is severed from religion, and is regarded as something alien and distinct from it. Religion, however, has a broader significance than this, and the most obscure creed embodies in its ritual some longing human cry for that goodness, that virtue, that morality, which many, with thoughtless judgment, divorce from religion. And is not a life of moral excellence, of good and noble character, of pure-heartedness, the very end and object of religion? Is not the substance and spirit, of which worship and adherence to a form of faith are but the shadow and letter? In religion, as in other things, there are the means and the end, the methods and the attainment. Worship, beliefs about God, adherence to creeds, these are some of the means. Goodness, virtue, morality, these are the ends. The methods are many and various, and they are embodied in countless forms of faith, but the end is one. It is moral grandeur. Thus the moral man, far from being irreligious, because he may not openly profess some form of worship, possesses the substance of religion, diffuses its spirit, has attained its end, and when the sweet kernel of religion is found and enjoyed, the shell, protective and necessary in its place, has served its purpose and may be dispensed with. Let us not, however, be misunderstood. The moral man does not refer to one who has only the outward form of morality, appearing moral in the eyes of the world, but keeping his vices secret. Nor does it refer to him whose morality extends only to legal limits, nor to those who are proud of their morality, for pride is the reverse of moral, but to those who delight in purity, who are gracious, gentle, unselfish, and thoughtful, who being good at heart, pour forth the fragrance of pure thoughts and good deeds. By the moral is meant the good, the pure, the noble, and the true-hearted. A man may call himself Christian, Jew, Buddhist, Mohammedan, Hindu, or by any other name, and be immoral. But if one is pure-hearted, he is true and noble and beautiful in character. In a word, if he is moral, then he is an inhabitant of the holy city, in which there is no temple. He is, by example and influence, a regenerator of mankind. He is one of the company of the children of the light. End of Chapter 5. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 6 of The Shining Gateway by James Allen. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Andrea Fiore. Chapter 6. Memory, Repetition, and Habit. I shall gain, by purity and strong self-mastery, the awakened vision that doth set men free from painful slumber and the night of grief. When a particular combination of words has been repeated a number of times, it is said to have been committed to memory, that is, It can be repeated without any visual reference to the words themselves, without any pause or effort. Indeed, the words then have a tendency to repeat themselves in the mind, and sometimes people are troubled with the ringing of a refrain or the repetition of a sentence in the mind, which they find it very difficult to get rid of and forget. There is a sense in which the whole life is a process of committing to memory. At first there is act. From act springs experience. From experience arises recollection. From recollection, repetition. And from repetition is formed habit. Hence proceeds impulse, faculty, character, individualized existence. Life is a repetition of the same things over again. There is very little difference between the days and years in the life of a man. One is almost entirely a repetition of the other. Every being is an accumulation of experiences gathered, learnt, and woven into the life by a ceaseless series of repetitions, extending over an incalculable number of lives, which thread their way through eons of time. The life of a man, from the germ cell to maturity, is a repetition, in synthesis, of the entire process of evolution. There is a cosmic memory at the root of all growth and progress, which is an informing and sustaining principle in the process of evolution. The sensuous memory of man is fickle and ephemeral, but the supersensuous memory, which is inherent in all matter, building up forms and faculty, is infallible in its reproduction of experiences. Life is ceaseless reiteration. Nature ever travels over old and familiar ground. Man is daily repeating that which he has learnt through the schools of experience, in which the lessons acquired may have long been forgotten, but the acquired habit is not forgotten. It is carried forward and continues to act. The unconscious and automatic ease which marks the play of faculty is not the ready-made mechanism of an arbitrary creator. It is a skill acquired by practice. It is the consummation of millions of repetitions of the same thought and act. Thoughts and deeds long persisted in become at last spontaneous impulses. It is a profound truth that there is nothing new under the sun. It is possible and highly probable that, in the round of eternity, even all our modern inventions and mechanical marvels have been produced innumerable times on this and in other worlds. In this world, new combinations of matter appear from time to time, but are they new in the universe? Who dare say that, in the mind which overarches eternity, the cosmic memory is not reproducing things long since fashioned out of itself? Nothing can be added to or taken from the universe. Its matter can neither be increased nor decreased. Chemical combinations of matter vary, but matter itself cannot vary. Life likewise does not change. In the forms of life there is continuous flux, but in the principle of life there is no increase or diminution. Forms come forth only to retreat and disappear, but that which disappears is not lost. The memory of it is retained, and it continues to be repeated. Eternal disintegration is balanced by eternal restitution. The mind of man is not separate from the eternal mind. In its daily repetitions is indelibly written the record of all its past. Character is the accumulation of deeds. Each man is the last reckoning in the long sum of evolution, and there is no falsification of the account. The mind continues to automatically perform the habit, which encloses a million repetitions of the same deed. Compared with this ineffaceable, unconscious memory, the memory of 80 years and 10 is as a fading vapor to an Egyptian pyramid. The tendencies, impulses, and habits of which a man is a victim are the repetition of his accumulated deeds. They enfold the destiny which he has wrought. The grace, goodness, and genius which a man exhibits without conscious effort are the fruits of the accumulated labors of his mind. He repeats with ease that which was learned by painful labor. The wise man sees a reflection of himself in the fate which overtakes him. Life flows in channels. Every man is in a rut. Men tell their fellows to get out of their ruts, but they themselves are in ruts of another kind. The flow of law, of nature, cannot be avoided, but it can be utilized. We cannot avoid ruts, but we can avoid bad ones. We can follow along good ones. In their training and education, the children of today are strictly confined to ways which are worn by the feet of 1,000 generations. In his fixed habits and characteristics, the man of today is reviving the actions of 1,000 lives. It is true that men are bound, but it is equally true that they can be unbound. The law by which a man becomes the sorrowful victim by his own wrong deeds is a blessed and not cursed law, for by the same law he can become an instrument of all that is good. Habits chain a man, but he himself forged the links. He whose inner eye has opened to perceive the law does not complain. The bondage of evil is a heavy slavery, but the bondage of good is a blessed service. The will of man is powerless to alter the law of life, but it is powerful to obey it. The great law makes for good. It puts a heavy penalty on evil. Man can break his chains and shake himself free, and when he enters earnestly upon the work of self-liberation, all the universes will be with him in his labor. Repetition and habit he cannot avoid, but he can set going repetitions that are harmonious. He can form habits that will crystallize into pure and noble characteristics. In the self-built archives of the mind are stored away the entire records of man's evolution. Man is an epitomized history of the world. In his outbursts of rage, we hear again the roar of the lion in the forest. In his selfish schemings to secure his coveted ends, we see the tiger stalking its prey. His lusts, revenges, hatreds, and fears are the instinct born of primeval experiences. The universe does not forget. Life remembers and restores. Between the sensuous and the supersensuous worlds is the Lethean stream, the river of forgetfulness. Only he who has passed into the supersensuous world, the world of pure goodness, remembers with the memory of life which transcends 1,000,000 deaths. Only he whose will obeys the universal will, whose heart is in harmony with the cosmic order, receives the vision which pierces through the veil of time and matter, and sees the before and the beyond. Man quickly forgets, and it is well that he forgets. The universe remembers and records. The repetition of an evil deed is its own retribution. The repetition of a good deed is its own reward. The deepest punishment of evil is evil. The highest reward of good is good. When a deed is done, it is not ended, it is but begun. It remains with the doer, to curse him if evil, to bless him if good. Deeds accumulate by repetition, and they remain as character, and in character is both curse and blessing. Suffering inheres in the discordant repetition of evil. Bliss inheres in the rhythmic repetitions of good. Seeing that we cannot escape the law of repetition, let us choose to do things which are good, and as one establishes habits of purity, the divine memory will be awakened within him. End of Chapter 6. Recording by Andrea Fiore.